when I was talking about the instruction via the computer was about the process of giving instructions. Okay, so in some of the cases they have individual computers for each student, but in some cases they might have one computer for 2 students. And before listening to the instructions, the students used to go to start doing something on the computer. That's what I meant by the instruction. Yeah, of course I agree with you. This is a great distraction for the teachers as well in terms of classroom management, in terms of organizing the lesson. But what I believe it can be achieved through well-planned objectives and the timely planned stages during the lesson.
You see, this is another benefit of online teaching and learning, because you have to use the computer anyways. So,
yes,
you know, it can't be a distraction. So.
Yes, and I'm happy our teachers involved in the project will find it much easier because they have started using this quite long ago.
This era is amazing, I think, in the sense of that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Miss Nutella, have you seen the picture of the Facebook with priest a bit saying in front of the school, no mobile phone? Yes, and no learning face-to-face here. Yes, I've seen that was a great thing. And I think we're all facing the new changes in education regarding this. Nana, any questions, any comments? Because we have the person here who is in charge of the project and who really grants people with this wonderful opportunity to obtain what I was talking about.
I do not have any questions, as I'm well aware of what is going on in the classroom when we do the CETL classroom observation. I just want to emphasize once again that, well, I think that integrated teaching and learning is the future of teaching and learning. And we have seen very clearly on many examples, not only in Tbilisi and Rustavi, but also in some other regions, where we started to pilot this program a couple of years ago, that kids, first of all, yes, they are the aborigines of the digital world, they really are. And secondly, they can multifunction. They can absorb a lot of information in the same time. And the more complicated you make the task for them, the more motivated and more alert they are to absorb as much as possible. They are less bored this way. And as for the teachers and their distraction, yeah, it's been a big challenge, I think. One of the biggest challenges here in Georgia is to make teachers work together. This has been a tremendous breakthrough to see that we can actually put 4 different teachers in the same class, where sometimes we have over 30 students, and they can actually coherently collaborate and make the class a success, make a class a learning process where kids actually take something away with them when the class is over. So I think we should continue with such experiments, and we shouldn't be afraid.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Thank you, Nana. We have very much interrelated topics in this session, and Mr. Nick will continue talking about the impacts of globalization in higher education. Thank you.
Thank you. Dear friends, colleagues, first of all, of course, I would like to express my gratitude to the organizers of the conference, and I have the honor, okay, for the third time to participate the conference related to the education and sciences in my native university. So with your permission, so I would like to discuss generally about the role of globalization in the development of education, not only higher education, but also school education, and discuss about problems, about the positive aspects, etc., etc. Now, first of all, you know, here with regard to the education, once long time ago, Aristotle mentioned that the happiness is on the side of this personality who studies and works too much. Furthermore, with regard to the famous Roman philosopher and poet Ovidius, so he mentioned that only educated personality can be free by this way. And with regard to the Francis Bacon, a famous English philosopher, he mentioned the second half of the middle centuries that as the main power is to have the information. Yes, okay, it's information power. It was mentioned a long time ago, before the starting of the industrial revolution. And with regard to the power of information, we know here that we live today in the era, or in the information era. With regard to the information era, Daniel Bales, the American scientist, presented his idea in the second half of the 20th century. As you know, his concept about the post-industrial society, where one of the main principles, according to him, had to be the principle of meritocracy. Yes, accordingly, who by this way studies good and works good, by this way on the concrete educated person, yes, should be by this way the higher demand, and accordingly by this way say on the level of education is dependent as level of education professionals is dependent the level of income of the concrete personality. So yeah, we are discussing about, first of all, about the globalization. Yes, okay, and of course the education itself of course plays its decisive role related to the globalization. With regard to our global world, it should be mentioned here the GDP of our world is about 86 trillion US dollars. That's the volume of investments, including to the education sectors, till within the period of 2019, because today, because of well-known reasons, situation is changed. We know that the volume of investments prevailed 3 trillion US dollars. Furthermore, with regard to the volume of trade, it prevailed by this way 20 trillion US dollars, and accordingly by this way, so when we live in our globalized world, yes, it creates a convenient base for the different type of the exchange programs, and the development of the learning procedures in the different countries and regions of the world. But however, at the same time, we should mention here about the main problems. Now, with regard to the problems related to the COVID-19, we know here that according to the estimations of the World Bank, world economy will decrease for about 3% within the period of 2020. Accordingly, our planet will lose about 5 trillion US dollars. Furthermore, with regard to the unemployment, there will be more, can be created more than 50 million unemployment places in the different regions of the world. But when we are discussing about the problems related to the concretely education, here we should mention first of all about the problems which is interrelated with illiteracy in the world. It should be mentioned that according to the World Bank estimations, that there are about 16%, 16% of the world population who is illiterate. It's about 1 billion people if we take into consideration that the number of population in our planet is 7.8 billion people. And of course, 95% of the illiterate people is the percent of the illiterate people is coming on as countries of the global south, on the developing world. Among all the leader countries, it should be mentioned here about Bhutan, for example, country which is located in South Asia. 94% of the population of this country is illiterate. With regard to Afghanistan, it's about 92% of the population of Afghanistan is illiterate. More than 80% of illiterate people in such countries as Burkina Faso, as Somalia, for example. Yes. Furthermore, we should mention here, yes, about the possibilities to the access to the schools and universities, yes, in the developing countries. We know here with regard to the schools in most of the countries of the developing world, yes, children, yes, okay, they have the access to the basic schools, and by this way to get the education within the period from 6 years to 12 years. But with regard to the middle and high schools, by this way, in more than 50 50% of the countries, the school, the children in more than 50% of the countries from the developing world, they have not enough access by these ways, and it's this ability of the state to provide as the secondary education within the schools on the level of the middle schools and high schools in this regard. Yes, this is one of the main problem. Other problem, it is in this case interrelated with let's say here with the number of students. Okay, with regard to the number of students, again here is huge differences between the countries of the global north, and on the share of the countries of the global north is coming about 20% of the world population, and more than 60% of the world health. Yes, and accordingly on the rest part of the world, of the developing world, it is coming about 80% of the world population and less than 40% of the world GDP. So, and this one of the important factor here, it should be mentioned related to the higher education, that, for example, in comparison, if in the Scandinavian countries or in USA, Canada, for each 10,000 people is coming between 500, I apologize, between 500 and 600 students in many countries of developing world, for example. Yes, for the 10,000 people is coming less than 100 students. For example, with the countries of the subtropical Africa, it should be mentioned that there are only about 5-6 people with higher education among of the 10,000 people, countries from the subtropical Africa. Furthermore, it's necessary also to mention for related to the so-called functional illiteracy. We know here when people, yes, they can read and write, of course, but with regard to the function, even in the United States of America, there are about 30 million people with functionally illiterate. In the United States, of a first country in the world, according to the according to the GDP, we know where GDP in USA prevails 21 trillion US dollars. And this problem, you know, concerns very much, for example, Georgia, related to the functional illiteracy because of the transition process within the 90s. We know that there were many people, and there are many people with high education and literate people. Of course, we know here that the literacy level in Georgia is 100%, according to the estimations of the CIA, the Central Intelligence Agency of the United States of America. In 2010, Georgia was among of about 15 countries where the illiteracy is 100. Literacy level is about 100%. But from the other side, we have the problem related to the functional illiteracy, when many people with appropriate education, school education or university education, but cannot find the jobs because demand on their specialty is low. It's with regard by this way of related to the problems. But of course, we should mention here also about the positive aspects related to the education. Particularly, first of all, we started our discussion about the problems related to the level of illiteracy. But with your permission, I would like to say that despite the fact that there are about 1 billion illiterate people, from the percentage point of view, as the number of the share of the illiterate people in the world population is gradually decreasing. For example, if in the beginning of the 20th century, there were about 90% of the illiterate people in the world population. After the World War II in the 50s, their number decreased to 55%. That means the world population. In the 70s of the 20th century, the percentage of illiterate people was about 37%. But a rapid, by this way, decreasing the number of the illiterate people was held after the Cold War period, particularly since the period of 90s of the 20th century till 2010, the number of the illiterate people in the world decreased from 25% to 18% to 18%. No, so and we should mention that no, unfortunately, among the females, there are about the level of illiteracy among of the females in the world is about 24%. But anyway, of course, from the percentage point of view, the number of illiteracy is decreasing. Furthermore, it's interesting also to mention here, of course, that about the gradual increasing in general the number of the students in the world, according to the general director of UNESCO in the beginning of in the first decade of the 21st century, there were about 150 million students in the world. Internet consuming of internet. Can you imagine that if we bring such statistical data, that from the year of 2000 till the year of 2017, number of the internet consumers in the world increased till 930 for about 933%. Accordingly, as of today, there are about 50% of the world population who has appropriate access to the internet. So we were discussing. Yes, it's when we were listening our keynote speaker today. So and after we were listening Ms. Eka's presentation related to the English, and here also it's very interesting to mention here how the English promotes the globalization process in the world. As I mentioned here today, that as to the year of 2010, there were 7.8% of the native English speakers in the world, but with regard to the English, there are about 1.5 billion people who speak English by this way. Yes, okay. And you know here that gradually, but in many countries in the world, the English-speaking universities are introduced. In Georgia, we know our university is functioning since the period of 1995, but new universities also in Georgia American University, for example, and several sectors in English, for example, in Tbilisi State, as the Tbilisi State University appeared later. And of course, everything is promotes the more integration of Georgia to the globalized world. We should take into consideration that about 60% of the applicants during the national exam they choose from the foreign languages English language. So English language today has a leading position in comparison with Russian language. So furthermore, of course, it's necessary to mention here about the role of international institutions in the globalization process. First of all, we should mention here, of course, about the UNESCO. You know that after the foundation of the United Nations in 1945, UNESCO was one of the first UN specialized agency, which was founded in the year of 1946. Yes, by this way we should know. By this way we can understand how, by this way, international community paid attention to the development of education, science, protection of the cultural heritage. Because first, by this way, UN specialized agency was founded. It was UNESCO, by this way, and we know here about the recommendations of UNESCO, according to which each country should release about 6% of its GDP for the education process in the world. Of course, it's necessary, by this way, to mention here about the different type of international conventions which promotes education on the global level. Particularly, we know here that in 1948 it was adopted as it was approved by the General Assembly of the United Nations, the Universal Declaration on Human Rights. According to the 26th article of the declaration, yes, okay, 26th article, yes, according to the 26th article, each state which joined to the convention, by this way, is obliged to provide the free access to education for the children. Yes, okay. No, with regard to later, by this way, in the year of 1989, it was adopted the convention related to the protection of the right of children. And accordingly, by this way, one of the main attention is related to the providing the free education for the children. We know that according to the international standards, the children that are considered the people till the year of 18 years. 18 years. According to the Children's Convention, also convention related to the protection of the women's right, yes, which was adopted in the year of 1979, also by this way provides gives a recommendation for the maximal granting some education for the female. By this way somehow to improve the problems which are interrelated with gender balance. Of course, very important here to mention here about the Bologna process, and it's an example. I mean, the development of the integration process is a field of education in Europe. It should be example for the other regions in the world. We know here that in the year of 1988, it was adopted as a Magna Carta Universarium in Bologna. We know why in Bologna, because Bologna is considered the oldest university in Europe and in the world, yes. And accordingly to this document, we know here that in 1999 it was adopted the Bologna Declaration, which by this way promoted the integration of the field of education in Europe, yes. Introduction of the 5 minutes. Good. Okay. So
no, actually we are out of time, but
okay.
I would like you to lead to the conclusions. Thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry for
Okay.
interruption.
Okay. 2 minutes. Okay. Can I?
Okay. I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you. So I apologize. Yeah. For my and Bologna process. And of course, it's important to mention here the development of the fundamental and applied sciences. I would like to say that about 2/3 of the fundamental researches in the world that are coming on the universities, and practically 100% of applied sciences that are developed in the universities. Of course, it's important to mention here about the establishment of the huge spaces, yes, okay, for the development of education and science. Silicon Valley is one of the example, by this way, yes, which was established on the base of the Stanford in California, on the base of Stanford University and San Jose Machinery Industry University. And within the Silicon Valley, they are involved in the employment activities in the field of education and science, about 300,000 people. With regard to Georgia, also very important to mention here that, of course, Georgia, about the reforms in the field of education in Georgia. We know here that Georgia joined finally Bologna process in 2005 after the Bergen conference, and introduced the new, by this way, European style of learning. And also, according to the 35th article of the Constitution of Georgia, also state takes the responsibility for the providing the education for people. So it's for children. It's important, by the way, to mention here also, yes, about schools. There are more than 2,000 schools in Georgia. Among of them, there are 90% of schools that are public schools, by this way, yes, and no, about 60 universities. So I think that gradual introduction of Georgia to the globalized world in the field of education, of course, will create a convenient base for the further development of the country. And in general, by this way, development of the integrational processes in the world in the field of education, by this way, will create a convenient base for the fact that our world, our planet will be secured in the future. And maybe after the post-COVID-19 events, also should be mentioned that somehow also it is expected the acceleration of the different type of educational activities. Mrs. Natella was mentioning about distance learning process, was how it will be more and more possible by this way development of distance learning, or organization such type of conferences by this way. Yes, our conference where by this way, I don't know, more than 20 countries participate from their homes, but how by this way it is shown by this way how the world by this way is more integrated when colleagues by this way from the different countries have the opportunity within the different events, including our event, to meet each other and exchange their point of view, including, or first of all, in the field of education. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Nick. The impact of globalization brought the format of this conference in that way that we are. For example, we are here 9 people representing, I guess, 3 different countries, Georgia, Israel, and Iraq, I guess, right? And the next topic is about linguistic landscape in Erbil. Mr. Kafi, that's your presentation time. Join us. We can't hear you. Please unmute your mic.
Oh, do you hear me?
Yes, we do.
Good morning, and thank you very much for having me. My presentation title is The Linguistic Landscape of Erbil City. Let me tell you a brief about the study. The study focuses on the linguistic landscape of Erbil City, which is located in Kurdistan region, north of Iraq, where the minority and majority languages are spoken. It also shows the use of the minority and majority languages. The state language is both Arabic and Kurdish, and English as an international language on language science. It also shows the use of these languages as related to the differences in language policy regarding the minority and majority languages in this context. The state language, language of speaking, language of education, and language of science. The data of this study include some pictures of language signs in some streets, malls, and shops of the context that were analyzed so as to indicate the number of languages used. The languages of the signs and the characteristics of bilingual and multilingual signs. The results show that the linguistic landscape has connection with the official language policy concerning minority and majority languages. Let me tell you what the linguistic landscape is. Landry and Boris have defined a linguistic landscape as the language of public road signs, advertising billboards, street names, place names, commercial shop, signs, and public signs on government buildings combines to form the linguistic landscape of a given territory, region, or urban agglomeration. The linguistic landscape of a territory can serve 2 basic functions, as informational and as symbolic. In addition to the written text, Shohamin and Waxman show that getting a deeper meaning of a site must include images and pictures, the geographical locations where it is placed, the history, politics, and the practices of the people who attend the site. Ignoring these components leads to inaccurate interpretations. The Kurdish linguistic landscape has changed greatly in this past 2 decades. Kurdistan region is an autonomous region in the north of Iraq. It has about 6 million inhabitants. The capital of the region is the city of Erbil. The population of Erbil is between 1.5 to 2 million inhabitants. Kurdish is the official language and 93% of the population of Erbil city mother tongue is their, 19% of the population of Erbil city's mother tongue is Kurdish. As I mentioned earlier, the study focuses on linguistic landscape of streets, malls, governmental buildings, and shops in multilingual city of Erbil in the autonomous region of Iraq, where the majority language of Kurdish is spoken. In the study, 2 questions will be answered. Number 1, what languages are displayed on linguistic landscape of Erbil city? And number 2, to what extent do the signs in the Erbil city represent the current local language? If I tell you an overview of Kurdish language, Kurdish is the language spoken by the Kurds in Western Asia. Approximately 40 million people speak Kurdish in Iran, Iraq, Turkey, and Syria. There are 3 dialect groups, which are Northern Kurdish, Central Kurdish, and Southern Kurdish. Central Kurdish has the 2 dialects of Sorani and Badini, which is also called Kurmanji, which use different alphabets and huge differences in lexicons and other aspects of language. Sorani dialect uses a type of Arabic script, while Kurmanji, which is Badini, is based more on the Roman alphabet. The Badini people from the Hawk city use Arabic script as well. Over 3/4 of the people speaking Badini dialect live in Syria, Turkey, and northern parts of Iraq and Iran, while Sorani is spoken in much of Iraqi Kurdistan, mainly in Erbil and Suleymaniya city, and also west of Iran. Badini is spoken by Kurdish people in some countries from former Soviet Union as well. Kurdistan generally include all 4 parts: Iraq, Iran, Turkey, and Syria. Among Kurdish people, other names are mentioned, such as Northern Kurdistan for the part of Turkey, Western Kurdistan for the part of Syria, Eastern Kurdistan for the part of Iran, and Southern part, which is my part, I mean the part of Iraq. Kurdistan in Iraq and language policy. Language policy refers to decisions made about languages and their uses in society and education, which is created by authoritative bodies, which are often driven by ideologies, by laws and regulations through preliminary decisions or statements by ministries of education. Language policy on the ground is initiated by people in schools and communities as part of language practices. Kurdistan is an area located in the north of Iraq with 4 main cities, which are Erbil, the capital, Suleymaniya, Duhok, and Halabja. An application of linguistic landscape as a pedagogical tool can be of great relevance to educators and students. The Kurdish language, alongside the Arabic language, became language of instruction in the schools of the above-mentioned cities after signing the Treaty of 11th of March 1970 between the Iraqi government and the Kurds after almost a decade of armed revolution led by the Kurdish leader Mustafa Barzani against the then Iraqi government in Baghdad. Since 1991, the 4 northern cities have been under the control of the Kurds themselves. After free elections in 1992, the first Kurdish parliament was established which proposed Iraq to be a federal country. After ending Saddam Hussein's regime in 2003, a new constitution was written in 2005 for Iraq and identified the Kurdish language as an official language of Iraq, like Arabic one. Now, the Kurdish text can be seen on Iraqi passport, currency notes, and government buildings as well. In Iraqi Kurdistan, Kurdish is the official language of government and media. In Iraq as a whole, it is recognized as an official language alongside Arabic. The discussion of the study regarding the number of languages shown on signs, results indicate that most of the signs in a real city have 2 or more languages. I mean, they are bilingual or multilingual, and a few of them are monolingual. The number of bilingual and multilingual has increased after 2003. I mean, after collapsing Saddam Hussein's regime. The first and prominent language on bilingual signs is Kurdish, which is the majority language in Erbil. And the second language is English on the most of the signs, though Arabic is the formal language in Kurdistan. But very few of them are written in Arabic. And this issue is due to the disputes between Kurdish autonomous government and the central government of Baghdad. Kurdish is top language and English as well. However, Arabic has a little presence in multilingual signs. Concerning the font size of language on multilingual and bilingual signs, there is a little difference. All languages have almost the same font.
I'm sorry, Mr. Kafi, could you please conclude the presentation, because we are out of time and the session in room 1 is waiting for us there.
Okay, give me 2 minutes.
Yes.
English has grown much in Kurdistan after ending Saddam Hussein's regime in 2003, and it exists everywhere alongside the Kurdish language, because there are about 25 consulates of different foreign countries in Erbil city. Apart from this, many international schools now exist in the city where the English language is the language of instruction. As it is seen, most of the monolingual signs are in English. In conclusion, Kurdish is the second official language in Iraq and first official language in Kurdistan Autonomous Region. Kurdish dominates in this region, and it is the omnipresent in the linguistic landscape of Erbil city. At the same time, English is written with Kurdish as if it is the second formal language of the region. In a nutshell, linguistic landscape in Erbil city is a random phenomenon. It's up to you to choose any language you want: Kurdish, English, and Arabic. I think that the 2 minutes finished. Thank you very much. If you have any...
Thank you very much. I think we had quite an interesting session with interesting presentations. Now it's high time to move to room 1 session. So again, you can go back to the link provided in the program. So thank you. See you there.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
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 Bye-bye. Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.